fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Stateside Footy. I'm your host, Steve Silver, and man, let me tell you something. I woke up this morning with the realization that the United States men's national team shit the bed in the March window. I actually had to check the Twitter feed to make sure that I wasn't hallucinating there for a second, but yeah, no, it actually happens. As the U.S. men's national team dropped a pair to a couple of top 20 European teams in this March window on an aggregate score of 7-2. Obviously the damage was done in the first leg against them. In some respects, they were somewhat competitive against Portugal, but still, getting clean sheeted against a team that was struggling to score goals against Mexico the game before, certainly kind of was a kick in the balls, if you will. But that being said, man, tonight we're going to be doing a little thing we like to call stock up, stock down tonight on the show, as we feature some players who obviously has stock went up with their performances against Belgium and Portugal, and then of course 3 who did not do themselves any justice. And most would probably need a priest, to send some prayers to heaven, because they may, with this play, they probably played themselves off a World Cup roster. At least in my opinion, I think so as well too. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of moving parts. But that being said, what I will say is, definitely one of them should not make the World Cup roster. I think because of a lack of depth in certain areas, they probably will, but maybe not, man. Maybe this is going to be a numbers game after all, and we will find out, obviously, when the official World Cup roster gets announced. But let's go ahead and get into it. But before we do, actually, please do me a favor and make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming Stateside Footy content. And of course, tonight, obviously, stock up, stock down. Tomorrow is my last World Cup show. Pretty much since the World Cup last season, when that as I was predicting, even back then, who I thought was going to eventually make the World Cup roster. Of course, that is going to be tomorrow night. And it's going to be kind of interesting too. trying to predict how this thing is going through the eyes of Mauricio Pochettino, just exactly what he is looking for, specifically when it comes to position. Different players have different skill sets, and of course, the way that Poch likes to play, it's not just as simple as cut and dry as a guy plays in Europe versus a guy playing in Major League Soccer. It doesn't work that way, and so for me, I think this exercise is actually pretty cool, so that is going to be tomorrow night at I think it's going to be 7:00 tomorrow night. So definitely stay tuned for that. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. And we're gonna start with some stock ups, and I do want to begin with Austin Trusty. And here's the interesting thing about Austin, and one of the things that I've noticed, especially from former players and pundits alike, that intensity, the mentality of the players may or may not have been there over these 2 matches, and it seems to be a reoccurring theme. But that being said, there is a subset of players that actually seem to play hard when they pull on the shirt, and Austin Trusty has essentially spent the last 6 months talking a good game, but when he steps on the field, he always seems to get a little bit overlooked. And yesterday, I wouldn't say that he was overlooked yesterday. As a matter of fact, I think Austin Trusty stood out, and I think the reason why was in comparison of what we saw against Belgium with Tim Ream. And I think for me at least, that was the big reason why he stood out. But that being said, when you're talking about hustle, and you're talking about playing to the whistle, and you're talking about making very good decisions when it comes to slide tackles, when it comes to blocks, when it comes to playing that left-sided position, he was good on the ball in the build-up, playing out of the back. He didn't have any troubles defending over the top. Or even down that right-hand side when Portugal was trying to attack. I thought Austin Trusty actually did a pretty solid job yesterday. And for me, this comes to no surprise, because I think I might be the only American that watches the Scottish Premier League. So I see Austin Trusty on a week-to-week basis. And from his, I guess you can say, from his beginnings with Sheffield United, when they were in the championship, to where he is now, his growth and his development, more importantly, his maturation has gotten better in the last year and a half. And one of the rubs about this is the fact that we really haven't seen him a lot. He'll get called into camp. He won't get minutes. And he has been, essentially, waiting patiently in order to get his shot. And he got his shot yesterday. And I thought he made the most of it. And when you're looking at in comparison to what we saw in that first match against Belgium and the performance that Tim Ream showed, obviously you have to take a step back and be like, okay, cool. Is this actually a viable option now? Granted, there is no more that's it. These 2 friendlies were the last two sets of friendlies before the roster gets announced, and then it's obviously it's World Cup warmups, and then then all of a sudden we enter that tournament. And so I guess the question has to be asked is, was that performance good enough that Pochettino could potentially be satisfied? I'm going to say yes. Because number one, all of the traits that some people think that Tim Ream still potentially possesses, Austin Trusty also possesses those same skill sets, right? And he's also younger. He's a little bit quicker. And you know what? He's also somebody, if you're playing in a back 3 and you're also pushing up a little bit on a higher line, dude's not going to be exposed. And so from that standpoint, when you're starting to talk about center back pairings, whether it's in a back 4 or in a back 3, Austin Trusty is one of those guys where I think that I don't think he takes this for granted. And because of that, for a fact he's going to give you a hard 90. And so from that standpoint, man, What I saw yesterday to me wasn't necessarily a surprise, as it is to some other fans out there. But that being said, man, Austin, I thought Austin, in that center back pairing with Chris Richards, I actually thought that was probably one of the strongest aspects of yesterday's match. Now, granted, the goal that they did score off the mistake, by the U.S. men's national team as they were trying to play the ball quickly forward, a little bit of a hard touch, and it lands on Vitinha's foot, and he plays it forward to Bruno Fernandes. And Bruno at that stage, his only play is that flick back. And so from that standpoint, it's like, okay, cool. You can chalk that up. But overall, throughout the rest of the match, man, I thought Austin played pretty well. And so from that standpoint, it is a massive stock up. I guess the question is, is he ready for this type of step up? And that to me is the only, to me right now, that's that is the unknown. What I would like to see is, Austin get another start. That start that's going to be coming up against Germany in the World Cup send-off. That is kind of where I want to see it again, because at that stage, you're going to have your full squad. And that, we're not going to have these type of situations where you're going to have 11 substitutions in the second half, or whatever the case may be. You're not going to see it. It is going to be, the mental preparation is going to be, essentially played as a World Cup game. And from that standpoint, you're going to see like-minded players around him. And so that's kind of what I want to see before that ultimate decision gets made. I thought this was a very good showing, but I think you guys have to agree with me on this one, that you kind of want to see it one more time before the World Cup starts. But definitely, I thought as far as his stock goes, with that performance yesterday, it is absolutely sky high. Another guy that I want to talk to you a little bit about is Patrick Aubameyang. And this one came at the behest of Ricardo Pepi. Ricardo Pepi. Now, one of the things that I want to know about this is, was Ricardo Pepi essentially not played because of whether or not his fitness levels aren't where they need to be? Was that something that they saw in training, where Aubameyang is obviously 100% fit? Is it a sharpness issue because he's coming back from injury, that type of thing? These are some of the things that I would like to know. But that being said, one of the things that I did see was Patrick Aubameyang come off the bench in that first one in a match that was certainly lost, but he certainly made the most of his opportunity by scoring late in that match against Belgium. But it also feels like at this stage that Patrick Aubameyang is somebody that Mauricio Pochettino can definitely trust to come in late in games. And it's going to be interesting to see how this striker pool is going to be picked for the World Cup, and what exactly does Mauricio Pochettino value in his strikers. What I will say is, at certain times it looked like, Aubameyang's hold-up play, certainly it looked a little bit better than, say, coming out of the Gold Cup in the September windows, from last year. He certainly has improved in that manner. To me, that was kind of like his biggest weaknesses. And it looked like, he struggled mightily in that hold-up play, especially when balls were being played long. It looked like he just physically got out-muscled and couldn't go up for those 50-50 balls. Now it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. But again, at the behest of a guy like Ricardo Pepi, Patrick Aubameyang got a lot of run in this window. And so from that standpoint, obviously the stock goes up, because, it was interesting from when he burst on the scene last January in Camp Cupcake to now. And it just seems like, there's a lot of faith and trust in this player. And it seems, and because of it, he seems to pay off that reward as well too. And so from that standpoint, I thought I thought his his substitution in that Belgian game, getting that goal late, and then of course yesterday coming off and playing off the left-hand side, he wasn't exactly phenomenal in that performance against Portugal. But that being said, he also wasn't a liability. And it's also yet another wrinkle to his game. Now, when he's actually playing at Derby County, for the most part, he is the out-and-out target 9, but they have used him on the left side as well too, in certain instances against certain opposition. And so there is that flexibility that Aubameyang can bring, much like Haji Wright as well too. But from that standpoint, what I will say is that it's clear that Patrick Aubameyang has carved out a role in this U.S. men's national team heading into World Cup 2026. And I think his performances over these two matches, as far as I'm concerned, solidified it in some way. The question is, are they going to carry 4 strikers? Are they going to carry 3 strikers? We're certainly going to find out. And I guess if they're going to carry 3, and if he's going to be one and Balogun's going to be another one, how do they make that decision between a guy like Ricardo Pepi and a guy like Haji Wright? So we'll find out because obviously this thing is going to be a numbers game. And so at that standpoint, obviously it's a wait and see type of situation. But what I will say is that from a stock situation, his stock is climbing. And I would probably assume that it wouldn't be foolish to say that he's probably going to be on the World Cup roster. Lastly, I do want to talk about Wes, because I thought Wes actually was the best player on the pitch for a good portion of the time in both matches. And it looked like Wes essentially came into this March camp with the right attitude. And of course, you're talking about sharpness, you're talking about fitness, you're talking about form. And he certainly has been the best player in the U.S. men's national team pool for at least 3 months heading into this one. And in that Belgian match, he easily could have got a brace in that first half. He missed a point blank, essentially a point blank shot, off a set piece early, as he, essentially kicked it right into the gut of, Belgium's keeper. And then, literally 15 minutes later, he scored the U.S.'s first goal. And I thought he carried that form in pretty well into Portugal. He always seemed to find himself in good positions, whether, either, to make an onward pass or to try to get a shot on net. But that being said, this was a little surprising to me because I was curious to see exactly how this would translate against, pretty solid teams in both Belgium and Portugal. And I just kind of wanted to see it for myself. And from that standpoint, I think this is the best version of Weston McKennie we've seen in quite some time. And just his ability, his ability on the ball, but it's not just the personal 1v1 ability. It's also the fact that he can facilitate multiple positions. I guess the question for me moving forward is like, where is this going to, where is his best position on the field? I would probably assume that if they're playing in a 3-4-2-1, for instance, you would probably like to think that Balogun and Pulisic are probably going to be 2 of those 3. And is it beneficial for a guy like Weston McKennie to be playing higher up the pitch, or is this going to be better for the U.S. men's national team for him to be kind of playing in that box to box role as a midfield link and a late box crasher in a midfield partnership with either a Tyler Adams or a Tanner Tessman, whatever the case may be? Is that the best position for him? In lieu of having a guy like Malik Tillman playing up there, or even a Gio Reyna playing up there, does that give this team, a better opportunity when it comes to their attack? And a part of me would like to think that's kind of where it should be. When it comes to creative tens, personally, when Pulisic's sharpness is 100% and on point, obviously he's going to be one of those guys. And a really big part of me feels like, Gio Reyna, and that was the bummer that Gio Reyna didn't get a lot of playing time in this window. But that being said, you look at a guy like Gio Reyna in that situation where you actually have two creative outlets, a 9, and then you also have a guy who can, you have a guy in Weston McKennie who can push up and make those late runs, and yet gives you another opportunity to score goals in a little bit of a different in a little bit of a different way. And a big part of me just feels like that would be the best way. But that being said, it's like, he was playing higher up the pitch in that first game. And I actually thought he was absolutely brilliant. So I guess I kind of want to hear from you guys out there. It's like, what would be in your estimation the best, the best place for West to be playing, come the start of the World Cup, that first game. I'm just kind of curious to know what you guys think, but a big part of me thinks that would probably be the best role for him. But as of right now, like, if he carries this form into the World Cup, I don't think it really matters where you put him. Put him on the pitch. This dude's going to find a way to get in a position to score a goal. So kudos to West. I actually thought he was the best player for the U.S. in these two friendlies. And also so far when it comes to form, he's been the best player in the pool for like 3 months now. So that's where I'm at with that. All right. Let's go ahead and talk about some stock downs now, because I do have 3. And 2 of the 3 seem a little obvious, but that being said, the third one isn't. And I also have to talk about as well too. So let's go ahead and get into Matt Turner. And I feel bad for Matt. I really do, because he is the goalkeeper that has the most experience on this roster. Obviously, he was the number 1 in World Cup 2022. And I thought that at that point he was coming into his prime. And I didn't necessarily think he was all that, I didn't think he was necessarily all that terrible in World Cup 2022. And it looked like he had himself a bright future. But in the intervening years, he lost his opportunity with Arsenal. It didn't necessarily work out at Forest. And now he's back in Major League Soccer. So from a club standpoint, he has regressed. But I also think his play has regressed as well too. And I think that was obvious in that start against Belgium. And I was actually happy that Matt himself got that start, because we had to, you have to make sure your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, and you have to make sure that you didn't necessarily overlook Matt. It's one thing, in Pochettino's early USMNT career, when he was getting his feet on the ground, and of course, he was the number 1 at that time. But as the windows progressed, I think that Pochettino saw exactly what Turner could bring, and I didn't necessarily think it was a bad thing that he turned to Matt Freese. But that being said, man, since the Gold Cup, Freese has been the better player for this national team. Everything that Matt Turner does, Matt Freese does, and there's some aspects he does a little bit better. But one of the things that Matt Turner hasn't been able to improve is his positioning when it comes to shots inside the 18 and also shots outside the 18-yard box. He just seems to be a step slow, never seems to be in a good position to make those diving saves. Point in case, that first goal by Belgium, dude, he was on the other side of the 6. He was on the other side of his line. It just, it wasn't a good look for a guy who, wanted to make a good impression. Like, this was the opportunity for him to reclaim that number 1 spot with a definitive performance. And listen, some of those goals were on him, some of them weren't. But that being said, when you're the starting keeper that gives up 5, yeah, dude, that's unfortunately it's going to be on you. And yeah, like that was pretty much it. And the stock goes way down now on Matt Turner, uh, to a point where it's like, yeah, he's probably going to be on the World Cup roster, but the conversation of whether or not he can reclaim that starting spot is pretty much done and dusted at this stage. Um, who knows exactly what happens, but even in that match against Portugal, I thought, Matt Freese's instincts were night and day better. Now, granted, I will finish with this on this one, that our goalkeeping situation is not as good as it used to be. We don't have that guy who's ready to step in, that's been quietly putting together a solid resume in Europe. We just don't have that guy. Diego Cochin is still 19, 20. And he needs to get away from Barcelona and get himself some starting minutes. And maybe there's something there in the 2030 cycle. Same thing with Gaga Slonina. He's got to get away from Chelsea, and he's got to get himself in a situation where he can start and he can play and he can continue that development. And he too potentially could find himself in the mix for 2030. But as of right now, these are our goalkeepers. And right now, Matt Freese is the best of what's available. So from that standpoint, I thought, Matt Turner had the opportunity and he let it slide right through his fingers. And there is, as far as I'm concerned, man, there is no more conversation. This is going to be Matt Freese's job 100% moving forward. He's going to be the starting keeper come game one in the World Cup. That being said, man, Matt Turner is going to be the experienced number two. So there's still going to be a possibility. But that being said, I think it was quite obvious that he didn't take advantage of the opportunity. So it also didn't help that this guy was playing it right in front of him. He probably had his worst performance in a U.S. shirt. And of course, I'm talking about Tim Ream. And here's the thing. I can appreciate Tim Ream. I really can. Because he was the guy who for many years was playing overseas, was not being called into the U.S. camp. He didn't come into the U.S. system until late in his career. He's definitely made the most of it. I don't think you can disagree with that. And I think really like the last high point for Tim Ream might have been Copa America 2024. There were a couple performances in those three matches in the group stage where I thought Tim played pretty well. But since then, it's been a slow erosion. We're talking about a dude that's 39 now. And for a guy who obviously was hanging on for this opportunity, he wanted to be a part of World Cup 2026, made the move to Major League Soccer. But that being said, anyone with two eyes who can see clearly, coming into the 2026 season, the first couple weeks of the MLS season, and you're watching Charlotte play, and you can clearly see that Tim Ream is a step slower. One of the things that Tim was pretty decent at, was the fact that for a guy who just didn't necessarily have that speed, his positioning was always pretty good. And from that standpoint, he always seemed to be in good positions to block. He was always in good positions to close down. Make some pretty good challenges. Was not afraid to make sliding tackles when it called for it. And he made the most of those defensive opportunities. But he was always his bread and butter was always building out of the back. He was always good with the ball at the feet. And if you needed him to make a line breaking pass, he was capable of doing it. And that was his value. But that being said, your number one job as a center back is to do what? Defend. That is your primary job as a defender. And what we saw, not just in that match against Belgium, but we've seen it since the start of the Major League season this year, is that, he just doesn't have the tools anymore. And this is, by the way, this is normal. This is normal. He's 39 years old. He's 39 years old. That's, Mother Nature is undefeated for a reason, man. And it comes to everyone. And obviously, man, I give Tim Ream a lot of kudos for hanging on as long as he did. But that being said, center back is already a position of a liability for this team anyway. And what we cannot have is a 39-year-old left center back that is problematic at best. It seriously, we just cannot have it. Now that we know who our 3 group stage teams are, and now that Turkey has played their way in, and their attack is pretty solid, man. We saw them in the pre-Gold Cup, the Gold Cup warm-up games, along with Switzerland. They can build up. They can build up quick. They can be direct. They can play balls over the top. And one of the things is, like, the way that I look at it is, if Tim Ream is a part of the plans, 2 of those all of a sudden become banana skin games. And for this team, the mentality has to be winning the group. That has to be the mentality. Winning the group gives us an easier path to potentially get to a quarterfinal, and we cannot rely on players that are clearly a liability. And that was the beautiful thing about Austin Trusty's performance yesterday, is because we do have somebody who can play the position. And actually, for like, I don't think there really is going to be a significant drop off. As a matter of fact, you can kind of see Austin Trusty actually playing and really melding well with with a Chris Richards and a Mark McKenzie, if that is the back 3. I actually can see that actually working pretty well. 3 center defenders that are good with their ball at their feet, very good positionally when it comes to defending, and all of them have pace, and all of them actually can play physically as well too. So, if you want to carry Tim Ream for the vibes, I guess he's it is the center back equivalent of Matt Turner. He's got the experience, so he can help. And if you need him in a pinch, okay. But that being said, it's like, his days of starting for this team have to be over. And I'm hoping that Mauricio Pochettino saw exactly what everybody saw against Belgium. So yeah, listen, man. I like, that's the thing. It's like I do appreciate what Tim Ream has done for this national team. And there was a time there where he was probably the best center back in the pool at one point a few years back. But Chris Richards has emerged as a leader in that back line, and the fact that we actually do have a good like for like replacement with Austin Trusty means that we can make the shift, and we're not going to be losing much in the way of talent. So from that standpoint, it's time. It's time. 100% it's time. And if you want to bring him, you can bring him. But that being said, this team can no longer rely on Tim Ream as a starter. All right. The last stock down is, unfortunately, it's Ricardo Pepi. And I didn't want to have to do it because I was expecting Ricardo Pepi to play and actually play a significant amount of minutes in this one. I thought it was going to go Balogun in the first game, and I thought it was going to be Pepi in the second game because, quite honestly, it felt like that would actually, that would be a good. It would be a good test for Pepi just to see exactly where he's at. But it's also from the standpoint where you can have guys like Pulisic, Tillman, McKinney, and Reyna do the heavy lifting as far as the creativity is concerned. you do have, Timmy Weah, and you do have, Jedi playing balls from out, from playing from both wings. And so from that standpoint, Ricardo Pepi can, play the role of a poacher, and he can do it well, but he didn't even see the field. And from that standpoint, when substitutions were coming on, especially in that Portugal game late, right? They bring in Ajamang. He comes on and plays on the left-hand side. And then late in that game, they bring Balogun back on. And that was a shocker to me because, quite honestly, like, Ricardo Pepi needs minutes with the national team. And he didn't get it at all. And it makes me wonder. Now, I guess the question is, the first question that I have for everyone here is whether this was a sharpness and a fitness issue. Maybe there was something in training that, Pochettino and his staff saw and just said, maybe not up to the levels that we need against these two teams. And, Balogun and Ajamang are already up to their peak fitness. So we'll keep him in camp, but, these two guys are going to get the bulk of the minutes in that position. The crazy thing was, like, Pulisic starting up top against Portugal, man. That was kind of an interesting one. Not that I didn't hate it, but to me, that was a excuse me, that was a clear-cut indicator that something didn't sit right with the Ricardo Pepi situation. And so from that standpoint, moving forward, I guess the question is like, how is the striker pool going to play out? I like, the only guy that right now that I have locked in as making this team in this position is Flo Balogun. That's the dude that I have locked in right now. The question is, who falls underneath him? Because here's the weird thing, right? When you talk about form and you talk about, who's been one of the hotter strikers right now for the U.S. Obviously, Balogun, yes. Haji Wright certainly has as well too. But for a large portion of the season, Haji Wright, I think he went on a stretch there, 17 games without a goal or an assist. That was from the conclusion of the October window all the way through February, the 1st of February. He didn't have a goal or an assist. Pepi obviously has been dealing with injuries, and Ajamang, he's been hot and cold. But that being said, coming into the month of March, he I think he scored 4 and 5. So he has his little spurts as well too. I guess the question is like, how do you suss this out? Is this going to be a situation where you bring 4 because you do have a guy like Haji Wright who can play off the left and he can also play a target? And so if you're going to go with multiple formations, depending on who you're playing, you can bring in Haji Wright and play him off the left if that's what you so choose to do. Or is this going to be a situation where maybe you want to carry an extra midfielder, or maybe carrying an extra forward? And so one of these guys has to go. Well, who's it going to be? Who is right now better for this U.S. men's national team heading into the World Cup? Is it Ricardo Pepi or is it Haji Wright? Is it Ricardo Pepi or is it Patrick Ajamang? Me personally, I think Ricardo Pepi is one of the 26 best players that this team can put on the roster. I actually believe it. Ricardo Pepi really is, a guy who can actually change the momentum of a game just that quick, man. He is very versatile, and the dude just has a knack for finding the back of the net. Whereas with a guy like Ajamang and potentially a guy like Haji Wright, like I feel like their form dictates their goal production. And who knows exactly how this is going to look like in a month. So again, I thought his stock went down because unfortunately he just didn't see the pitch in against two teams where he absolutely needed to see the pitch. He needed minutes and he didn't get it, and because of it, the stock goes down. I don't know how down though. That's the problem. I don't know how down. All right, I do want to talk about some guys that were kind of pushes. And Sebastian Berhalter is one of them. Sebastian took a lot of shit for that mistake in the Belgium match where he home dude comes around the corner, plays a shot in, and it looked like Sebastian Berhalter tried to flick it on, but unfortunately he flicks it right to an attacker. Shot goes in. It's a goal. It was a terrible mistake. But that being said, by the time Berhalter and those guys came on, Arfston, Berhalter, and some of the other guys came on, the game was already over against Belgium. And whatever happened in that, that wasn't the reason why we lost that match. It really wasn't. Christian Roldan was not the reason why. Him coming on at halftime was not the reason why we lost that match. We lost that match because, me personally, I just don't think we were prepared for a team like Belgium. And I also thought maybe our tactics were a little too safe. And quite honestly, I think in that first half, when we actually did control a good portion of that first half, I just don't think we took advantage of our opportunities. We had at least 4 clear-cut opportunities to score goals, and we only put away one of them. And from that standpoint, when Belgium equalized not that long after we scored, whatever momentum that we had was out the door. And in that second half, they absolutely made us pay. But by the time those guys came on, the game was already lost. And as far as I'm concerned, did it help matters? Absolutely not. It didn't help at all. But one of the things that I wanted to see was the response against Portugal. And I thought Berhalter was okay against Portugal. Was he great? No. Was he a liability? No, he wasn't. And I thought he redeemed himself a little bit better in that Portugal match. And from that standpoint, I have that as kind of like a push. I don't think the stock went up, and I don't think the stock went down at all. Not at all. I think he leaves the same way that he came in. And for me, Berhalter for me is a bubble guy. It's going to be what do they prioritize as for midfielders, right? So one of the things that I do know is that in the fall window, when we went to a back three, our midfield pairings were essentially 2 6s, which is why we saw Aiden Morris and Tanner Tessman and Tyler Adams and Christian Roldan, and they even brought in James Sands for a cup of tea. You know what I mean? Like, we were literally playing with 2 6s, and we weren't necessarily using a traditional box to box. And when Berhalter did get called in, he was coming off the bench late matches, and when the game had already been decided, and so he didn't necessarily play that high of a role. So like I think it was the November window where he didn't even get called in at all, if I remember correctly. So from that standpoint, you kind of like, when I saw this roster come out, I kind of realized that we weren't going to necessarily see the same formations. Now, what I will say is that, now this is just my opinion. There is a certain skill set that Mauricio Pochettino requires for each individual position, right? So, for instance, like if we're comparing, Sebastian Berhalter to Gianluca Busio, we'll just use that as a hypothetical here. If Busio was playing in a similar system, but he's not required to use skill set A, B, and C in order to be successful. And yet Sebastian Berhalter is required to use A, B, and C. And A, B, and C are what Pochettino needs in order to play that position for him at the national team. Then there's going to be certain players that are going to be called in because they fit the actual requirement of what he's looking to play. Like that, the whole MLS conspiracy theory thing it's just ridiculous to me. Because there is when you're building a World Cup roster, you're looking for the best qualified players to meet the demands of the position in which the coach likes the player to play. That's why Sebastian Berhalter keeps getting called in. It's the reason why Max Arston keeps getting called in, because there's he meets a profile of which the way that Mauricio Pochettino likes to play that position. Me personally, I think John Tolkien's a better player. And I've been consistent with that, but yet Max Arston continues to get called in. And I think it is really because, he just fits the profile a little bit better. That being said, when it came to this window, especially when you're coming into a situation where you're down 3-1, or you're going to press, and you're going to play with desperation because you're trying to stop the bleeding. And so from that standpoint, you're probably going to overcommit. You're probably going to be pressing a little bit, and you're going to be trying to play perfect because you're trying to find a way back into the match. And ultimately mistakes will happen, and especially against a team that has like legit world-class talent on their team. Shit, man, mistakes are going to happen. But what I did like was the fact that he rebounded, and he actually played a halfway decent game against Portugal. And so from that standpoint, I would probably assume for Sebastian, I'm sure he was happy with that performance. Another guy who I thought had a push was Max Arston. I thought Arston got absolutely abused against Belgium. When he came in, I think he actually had 2 goals scored against them off that right side, and he got exposed and burned. It was terrible. It was terrible. I think those last 2 goals came against Arston, and so from that standpoint, it's like, he couldn't handle the speed. He couldn't handle the speed of what Home Dude was bringing down that right side. It's true, man. It's true. He got exposed. But I thought that, he played well against Portugal. When he came on for Jedi in that second half, I thought he was okay. And again, you would like to see how certain players rebound. And if it was a kind of a situation where it happened again, yeah, you probably have a problem. You probably have a big problem. But I thought there was a couple nice movements for Arston in that game, in that second half. And I thought that corner pairing with him and Austin Trusty, I thought it was actually halfway decent. And so from that standpoint, it was nice. But again, when you have that type of performance in game 1 and game 2, it's got to be a push. He can't, again, I think he came in the exact same way. He leaves the exact same way he came in. And as crazy as this sounds, I actually have him as a bubble player. I would probably think that he's probably going to make the World Cup squad. But again, I've always thought John Tolkien was the better player. That's just how I feel. But it is what it is. So with that, again, like the overall synopsis of this one, it was just a bad window. I personally think that, Pochettino got it wrong. And, for a guy who has that type of experience and is coached at extremely high level and coach world-class players, there is there is something to momentum and there is something to rhythm. And I think that what the U.S. did in the fall was the start of something positive, considering the way that Pochettino's career started with the U.S., considering the failure in the Nations League, losing that Gold Cup final. It felt like the U.S. had turned a corner, and it felt like Mauricio Pochettino did right by the players by going to that back three. They seemed a lot happier playing in that system. It seemed they were actually starting to do the little things right. As a matter of fact, when they came into this window, they had been unbeaten in 5 heading into it. So they actually had a nice little string against good opponents. And one of the things that we had figured out already up to this point was the fact that they just don't play well in his base 4-back system. When you're playing out of the back, when you're trying to build up, they don't handle pressure really well. That's my biggest problem when you're playing out of the back, especially with this team, is by doing it, you're inviting the press. And when you're going up against teams that actually like to do it, it's going to make your build up a living hell. And we saw that at times. We especially saw it yesterday, against Portugal. That team was relentless, and the U.S. had a hard time getting out of their at certain points. They had a hard time getting out of their end. Versus what we saw in the fall, where it almost felt like it was the goalie's option, whether to play it out of the back or to play it long or to play it medium. But that being said, it just felt like for what he was trying to do, which is dominate the first half, score multiple goals, and then go into the half with the momentum. And at the 60-minute mark, maybe you make a tactical switch, you go to a back 4, and then you just bunker with 10 behind the ball, and then you kill off the match and you get your result. Or at least you try to hang on for dear life. And me personally, I just playing a 4-3-3, a 4-2-3-1, for me at large points in both of those matches, the biggest problem was they were kind of taking away central areas of the pitch. So, Christian couldn't drift into central areas and kind of be that facilitator. He actually, in that first match, he had to play hero ball because there was just nothing there. He couldn't get within 10 feet of the goal. And that's the biggest problem playing that type of formation is all their skilled players, with the exception of of Balogun, are farther away from goal, where it just seems like in that Ecuador match, in the Uruguay-Paraguay window, where it just seemed like most of our skilled players were within striking distance of the goal, which is where you want those players to be. And I really felt like we did a good job attacking down the wings too, with those wing backs, holding the width. If that was the plan in both of those matches, which was to dominate early, keep your opponent on their back foot, press, get your goals early, I don't think Pochettino did himself any favors by playing the way he did. To me, I felt like it was safe, because one of the things that I noticed is that we weren't playing with a high line. And our fullbacks pretty much didn't cross the midway line. On occasion in that first game, Weah pressed forward. There was a couple nice over the top balls to Weah. But that being said, he also has to track back and was caught out too. It didn't necessarily work out well for Weah in that first match. And again, it's the way that you set up. I just felt like it was far too safe. I felt like Pochettino was giving those two teams far more respect than they absolutely needed. I think he was a little bit more focused on what they were trying to do than what we needed to do. And I hope that lesson got learned. I really do. because actually the way that I look at it is there are actually far more positives to take out of these 2 losses than not. And it's just the way that this coaching staff looks at it. Because quite honestly, we haven't played European competition, this type of high level European competition in quite some time, because we just don't schedule these type of friendlies. We really don't. Especially in non-World Cup years, because of the Nations League, our schedule is far more packed against CONCACAF rivals, and we don't travel. So we don't have, for as much as I like CONCACAF, one of the things that is true is that it doesn't prepare you against these type of teams. The only thing that does is playing against them. And this federation does not schedule European friendlies. They just don't do it. A lot of it has to do with the television revenue, and they don't want to split it. Which is why we just don't see it anymore. Versus what we saw in the Klinsmann era, we'd have windows, FIFA windows, where we'd be on the road in Europe. Same thing under Bradley, same thing under Arena, Sampson, Bora. It's just a different situation these days, and that's one of the reasons why I thought we looked the way we looked. It's like, dude, we weren't prepared. But in losses, you can learn a valuable lesson. If you're paying attention, you can learn a valuable lesson, and that's why I don't think that the team that we saw against these 2 opponents, or I don't think we're going to see that same type of reaction come World Cup 2026. I think this team, if they're smart, they're going to take the lessons from these 2 losses, and they're going to apply it. And also from that standpoint, now that they played it and they've gotten used to the speed, a good part of me thinks they're going to be able to adjust. And maybe that's just me being a happy clapper for this national team. But that being said, it's like I've seen this national team get absolutely destroyed in pre-World Cup friendlies, only to show up at the World Cup and put in good performances. Granted, it's a different generation, I understand. But that being said, it's like, good teams take their lessons when they get them. So I'll just leave it at that. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. I do want to thank you guys for tuning in. Again, please make sure you hit your like and subscribe button. Also hit the notification bell. Because tomorrow will be my final World Cup roster prediction show. I predict the roster that I believe will be at World Cup 2026, based on strength, based on depth, and also based on talent. Because quite honestly, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how this thing fleshes out. So that is going to be tomorrow night at 7. And then that will conclude my coverage of the March window. And of course, this weekend, it's going to be back to Premier League. And of course, Major League Soccer. And I think as a matter of fact, I do believe the MLS live stream will return this weekend. So it's going to be fun. So there's plenty of coverage coming up here on Stateside Footy. So please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and also hit the notification bell. That's going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening. I know I will, because God damn it, I got a 5-day weekend. I am absolutely fucking lit. I'm going to enjoy it. And who knows? Maybe I get laid. Who knows? All right, guys. You take it easy. Good night.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams.